Have you ever wondered how a single moment can change everything? The billionaire didn't want to dance with anyone until the black cleaning lady walked in with her daughter, and everything changed forever. What nonsense is this? How dare this woman bring a child to the most exclusive ball in New York? Margaret Silverton's voice cut through the air of the golden ballroom like a razor. Her eyes fixed on Kesha Williams, 32, who had just entered the grand ballroom of the Aster Hotel with her 8-year-old daughter, Maya. Kesha shouldn't have been there. As a hotel maid, her shift had ended at 6 o'clock in the evening, 2 hours before the event began. But Maya had forgotten her favorite doll in the women's dressing room during an earlier visit, and she was crying so hard that Kesha had no choice but to go get her. Security. Margaret raised her gloved hand, her diamonds catching the light from the chandelier. We have intruders. The Silvertons' annual charity ball brought together the elite of Manhattan. Tickets cost $50,000 a person. Kesha in her simple navy blue uniform contrasted starkly with the ball gowns that cost more than her annual salary. Mommy, why is that lady screaming? Maya whispered, clutching her doll to her chest. Her natural curls were tied back in 2 braids that Kesha had lovingly done that morning. Calm down, sweetheart. Let's just get your things and leave, Kesha murmured. But 2 security guards were already blocking her exit. Across the hall, Alexander Silverton watched the scene. At 35, the billionaire heir to the Silverton empire was used to the social dramas his mother created. But something about the dignity of that woman and the innocent confusion of the child bothered him. Alexander, dear, Margaret approached with a venomous smile. Look at this embarrassing situation. These people have no boundaries. Kesha held her head high as cruel whispers spread through the room. She knew this kind of humiliation. She had grown up as the only black child in elite schools thanks to scholarships. She knew exactly how this story would end. Ma'am, the security guard approached. I need to ask you to leave. Of course, Kesha replied with supernatural calm. I just came to get something my daughter forgot. How convenient, Margaret laughed cruelly. Just when the richest men in New York are gathered here. That's when Maya, with the brutal honesty of an 8-year-old, looked directly at Margaret and asked, Why are you so mean to my mom? She works really hard to take care of me. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret paled. Alexander watched Kesha kneel down to her daughter's level, whispering something that made her smile. There was a natural grace in that movement, an elegance that no amount of money could buy. Do you guys know how to dance? Maya asked innocently to the room. In general, my mom dances beautifully. She taught me classical ballet by watching videos on YouTube. Could this moment lead to something extraordinary? Alexander found himself walking toward them before he even realized it. Margaret tried to hold him back by his arm, but he ignored her completely. May I have this dance? He asked Kesha, extending his hand. The entire room froze. 200 people from high society were in absolute shock. The most coveted billionaire in Manhattan was asking the black cleaning lady to dance. Kesha looked at his outstretched hand as if it were a trap. But Maya whispered, Go mom. Show them how beautifully you dance. And that's when something extraordinary happened. Kesha accepted Alexander's hand. And the moment the music started, she revealed a classical dance technique that left everyone speechless. She moved like a professional ballerina with an elegance that made Margaret realize she had completely underestimated the person she was trying to humiliate. But what no one in the ballroom knew was that this dance was just the first step in something much bigger that was about to change the world of these privileged people forever. If you're wondering how a cleaning lady developed such refined classical dance techniques and why Alexander risked his social reputation for a complete stranger, be sure to subscribe to Black Voices because this story of prejudice and overcoming adversity is just beginning. The music stopped, but the echo of the perfect dance still reverberated through the hall. Kesha had moved with such impeccable classical technique that even the professional musicians in the orchestra were speechless. When she and Alexander parted, 200 people remained in absolute silence. Impossible, Margaret whispered, but loud enough to be heard. Where would a person like her learn to dance like that? Maya ran to her mother, beaming. Mom, everyone saw how amazing you are. Kesha hugged her daughter, but her eyes remained fixed on Margaret. There was something in the Silverton matriarch's expression that she recognized immediately. The same look that had destroyed her dreams 15 years ago. Alexander. Margaret pulled her son away. I need to talk to you now. But Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Kesha. You danced like a professional. Where did you study? The question hit Kesha like a shot. For a moment, the memories threatened to overwhelm her. A long time ago, she replied simply. A long time ago? Margaret stepped closer, her eyes narrowing like a predator because I'm sure it would have been impossible for someone in your position to have access to classical ballet training. It was then that Victor Hartwell, renowned dance critic for the New York Times, approached the group. He had watched the performance with growing disbelief. Excuse me, he said, studying Kesha's face intently. But that technique, I recognize that style. It's from the Royal Ballet School. I only know one person who danced exactly like that. Kesha's blood ran cold. She grabbed Maya's hand. We have to go. Wait, Victor continued, ignoring her obvious discomfort. You wouldn't be. No. Impossible. Kesha Richardson died in a car accident 15 years ago. The name hit the room like a bomb. Margaret paled visibly. Alexander frowned, confused. But some of the older people began to whisper among themselves. Kesha Richardson, an elderly woman, approached. The prodigy who was going to be the first black principal ballerina at the Metropolitan Opera House. Maya looked at her mother confused. Mom, why are they talking about a dead person? Kesha took a deep breath. 15 years running from her past. 15 years hiding behind a new last name. 15 years believing she had escaped. But the past had a cruel way of resurfacing at the most unexpected moments. Because Margaret said in a cold voice of realization, her mother is not who she says she is. The truth was that Kesha Richardson had been the sensation of New York ballet. At 17, she had been accepted into the Royal Ballet School with a full scholarship. At 20, she was being groomed to become the first black principal dancer in the history of the Metropolitan. Her future was golden, promising, inevitable until the night Margaret Silverton showed up in her dressing room. You have talent, Margaret had said that distant night. But talent isn't enough. This world has rules, and one of them is that certain doors don't open for certain people. Kesha had laughed in her face. My talent speaks louder than your prejudices. We'll see, Margaret had replied with a cold smile. A week later, fake intimate photos of Kesha circulated in the media. Accusations of drug involvement came out of nowhere. Sponsors withdrew. The Metropolitan terminated her contract. Within a month, Kesha Richardson was ruined, humiliated, and banned from the world of dance. She had disappeared, taken the surname Williams, and sworn never to set foot on a stage again. She worked as a cleaning lady, a waitress, anything to survive and raise Maya on her own. So, Margaret said now, her voice laden with venom disguised as sweetness, the famous Kesha Richardson. What a coincidence that you should show up here at the ball of the family that helped you so much in the past. Alexander looked between the two women, sensing a tension he didn't fully understand. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking about justice delayed. Margaret smiled. Your new friend isn't just a cleaning lady. She's a professional liar who cheated the dance world 15 years ago. Maya squeezed her mother's hand. Mom, are you okay? Kesha looked at her daughter, then at Margaret, and finally at Alexander. She had spent 15 years believing she was a victim. But standing in that ballroom, surrounded by the same predators who had destroyed her first life, she realized something that would change everything. She was no longer the naive 20-year-old girl who had been taken by surprise. She was a 32-year-old woman who had survived everything they had tried to do to her. And this time, she would not be caught off guard. You're right about one thing, Margaret, Kesha said, her voice taking on a tone that made several people around them stop to listen. I'm not the person you destroyed 15 years ago. What Margaret Silverton didn't know was was that the woman she had tried to break had spent the last 15 years not just surviving but preparing. And now, back in the world that had rejected her, Kesha was about to show that some people don't just survive a fall. They use the experience to fly even higher. In the 3 days following the dance, Margaret Silverton worked with the relentless efficiency of someone who had orchestrated the destruction of lives before. She activated her network of contacts like a spider spinning its deadly web. "Dr. Williams," she said into the phone to Maya's school principal. "I'm concerned about a situation involving one of your students, Maya Williams. I have information that her mother may be involved in some questionable activities." Across town, Kesha was in the small apartment she shared with Maya, but she wasn't crying or hiding as Margaret had expected. She sat at the kitchen table with icy determination, doing something she had sworn never to do again, using the skills she had developed over 15 years of survival. Maya played in the living room, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Mommy, why are you looking through those old papers?" "Just organizing some things, sweetheart," Kesha replied, carefully studying each document she had kept for years. Birth certificates, proof of residence, but mostly detailed medical records and photographs with date stamps that told a very different story from the one Margaret had spread 15 years ago. The phone rang. It was Dr. Patricia Chun, assistant principal at Maya's school. "Mrs. Williams, I need to talk to you about a concern that has been brought to our attention. Some influential parents are questioning whether Maya should continue at our institution, considering certain allegations about her past." Kesha took a deep breath. 15 years ago, a call like this would have destroyed her. Now, she just smiled coldly. "Dr. Chen, I understand completely. How about we schedule a meeting? I have some information that may clarify these allegations." After hanging up, Kesha pulled out a yellowed business card she had kept in a drawer for years. David Kumar, private investigator and reputation recovery specialist. He had given her that card 5 years ago when he discovered by chance that she was the famous missing Kesha Richardson. David had been an investigative journalist before becoming a private detective. He specialized in cases where powerful people used their influence to destroy innocent lives. When he met Kesha, he offered his help free of charge, but she had refused, not yet ready to face the past. "David," she said when he answered, "it's Kesha. Kesha Richardson. I think it's time to accept your help." 2 hours later, David was sitting in Kesha's kitchen, his eyes shining with the excitement of someone who was finally going to see justice done. "Kesha, I never stopped investigating your case," he said, opening a thick folder. "Margaret Silverton didn't just destroy you. I found at least 6 other talented women who had their careers ruined by the same woman over the last 20 years. He spread photographs and documents across the table. A classical pianist, an opera soprano, 2 stage actresses, a sculptor, and a writer. All black or Latina. All with promising careers. All destroyed by the same pattern. Fake photos, planted accusations, sponsors pressured. Maya approached the table curious. "Mom, what are those photos?" "These are stories of brave people, my love," Kesha replied, hugging her daughter. "People who have been hurt, but who may one day see justice done." David continued. "But here's the interesting part. Margaret doesn't act alone. She uses a public relations firm that specializes in social crisis management. Basically, they plant false stories and destroy people who threaten the established order." Kesha studied the documents with the same intensity she used to analyze complex musical scores. "And you have proof of this?" "I have financial trails, leaked emails, recordings of some conversations. But I need something more. I need her to expose herself completely." It was then that Kesha smiled for the first time in days. Not a smile of joy, but the icy smile of someone who finally sees the whole picture. "David, what if I told you that Margaret Silverton is going to try to destroy me again in the next few days? What if I told you that this time, instead of running away, I'm going to let her get very close to success? That would be dangerous if she manages to plant a convincing story." "She won't," Kesha interrupted, her voice filled with a confidence that surprised even her. "Because this time, I'm not the 20-year-old girl who believed that talent was enough. Now I know exactly how she operates. David frowned. What do you have in mind? Kesha took out her phone and showed him a WhatsApp conversation. Margaret believes I'm just a scared cleaning lady. She has no idea that for the past 15 years, I wasn't just surviving. I was studying. The conversation showed messages from a group of former employees of the Aster Hotel where Kesha worked. But they weren't just cleaning ladies. There were waiters, security guards, receptionists, drivers. Invisible people who saw everything and knew all the secrets of the wealthy guests. Do you know what the advantage of being invisible to people like Margaret is? Kesha asked rhetorically. They do everything in front of you thinking you don't exist. For 15 years, I cleaned offices, emptied trash cans, organized documents that these people left lying around carelessly. David began to understand. You collected information. I documented everything. Every suspicious conversation I overheard, every compromising document I saw, every email they printed out and threw away without shredding it. Margaret Silverton thinks she's hunting easy prey. Kesha stood up and went to a closet from which she removed an old shoebox. Inside were flash drives, photographs, printed documents, and even recordings on a small digital recorder. But the truth is, she continued, her eyes shining with an intensity that made David realize he was in the presence of someone far more intelligent and prepared than Margaret could ever imagine. She's been hunted for years and doesn't even know it. Maya watched her mother with growing admiration. Mom, are you like a secret detective? Something like that, sweetheart. Sometimes when powerful people hurt other people, someone has to collect evidence to show the truth. David picked up one of the flash drives. Kesha, if this is what I think it is, it's exactly what you think it is. Margaret Silverton is about to discover that underestimating a woman who survived 15 years of forced invisibility was the biggest mistake of her life. What Margaret didn't know was that her next victim had spent the last decade and a half not just hiding, but preparing for the day when she would have enough courage to fight back. And when someone who has been underestimated for so long finally decides to show her true colors, the fall of the powerful is not only inevitable, it's spectacular. The next morning, Margaret Silverton woke up with a sense of impending victory. She had spent the night coordinating the final blow against Kesha, a story planted in New York's leading newspaper, alleging that the fake ballerina was emotionally exploiting a naive billionaire to get money. Alexander will see what a manipulative woman she is, she muttered to herself, dialing the reporter she had bribed. But when the phone rang, the voice on the other end was tense. Silverton, we have a problem. Someone leaked information about our agreement, and there's something else. Compromising documents about other women you helped remove from certain positions. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of documents? Bank transfers, recordings, emails. It's all in the hands of the Times. The story's out in 2 hours. Across town, Kesha was in David Kumar's apartment surrounded by journalists, civil rights activists, and lawyers. She was no longer the frightened cleaning lady. She was the center of a meticulously planned operation that was about to expose one of New York's most powerful families. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced, I present to you not only Kesha Richardson, one of the most talented classical ballerinas of her generation, but also the woman who has systematically documented 15 years of abuse of power by the Silverton family. Alexander arrived at Kesha's apartment just as the journalists began broadcasting live. He had received an urgent message from her. If you want to know the truth about your mother, come now. Kesha, what's going on? He asked, seeing the cameras. You're about to find out who your mother really is, she replied, handing him a tablet. And why she destroyed not only my life, but the lives of at least 6 other talented women over the past 20 years. The first pieces of evidence appeared on the screen. Recordings of Margaret instructing journalists to plant false stories. Bank transfers to public relations firms specializing in destroying reputations. Emails detailing how to remove undesirable elements from the New York cultural scene. Alexander watched in growing horror as a recording of his mother played. These people need to understand their place. When they try to rise above their station, someone needs to remind them of reality. My God, he whispered. She really did it. Maya was at school when it all began to unfold, shielded from the media storm her mother had carefully orchestrated. Kesha had made sure her daughter was safe before detonating the bomb that would destroy the Silverton empire. At the Aster Hotel, Margaret was in her presidential suite when she heard her own voice broadcast nationally. "A person like her should never have access to our world. It's a matter of maintaining the natural order of things." She tried to call her lawyers, but the line was jammed. She tried to contact allied journalists, but they had already switched sides. In a matter of hours, Margaret Silverton went from respected matriarch to social pariah. The phone rang. It was Alexander. "Mom, you need to explain these recordings." "Alexander, dear, you don't understand. I did this to protect our family, our legacy." "You did it out of pure cruelty," he interrupted, his voice cold. "And now you have to face the consequences." On social media, the hashtag #JusticeForKesha became a worldwide trend. Videos of her dancing at the prom circulated with millions of views. The contrast between her natural grace and Margaret's cruelty created a powerful narrative that captured the public imagination. David Kumar appeared on television with a folder full of evidence. Margaret Silverton used her influence to systematically destroy the careers of talented women, especially Black and Latina women, who threatened what she considered the natural order of the arts in New York. Companies began canceling contracts with the Silverton Foundation. Museums removed plaques bearing the family name. The Metropolitan Opera House announced an investigation into past discriminatory practices. Margaret attempted one last desperate move, appearing on a television interview. "These accusations are absurd. I have always supported diversity in the arts." But Kesha was prepared for that, too. During the live broadcast, David played a recording from just 6 months earlier. Margaret telling a donor that certain types of people were invading spaces that don't naturally belong to them. The interview was a total disaster. Margaret stammered, contradicted herself, and finally walked out of the studio when the host played more evidence. That night, Alexander went to Kesha's apartment. Maya was doing her homework at the kitchen table, oblivious to the fact that her mother had just taken down one of the most powerful families in America. "Kesha," Alexander said, "I need to apologize for my mother, for my family, for everything you've been through." "You don't need to apologize for someone else's crimes," she replied. "But you do need to decide what kind of man you want to be from now on." Maya looked at them. "Mom, why are there so many people talking about you on television?" "Because sometimes, sweetheart, when powerful people hurt other people, someone has to tell the truth. And today was our day to tell the truth." Across town, Margaret was alone in her mansion. Employees had quit. Friends had stopped answering her calls, and the foundation's board had voted for her immediate removal. She looked out the window at the city she had once ruled and realized she had completely underestimated Kesha Williams. The woman she had considered nothing more than a frightened cleaning lady had spent 15 years gathering evidence and building a network of allies that was now destroying her completely. Margaret picked up the phone to try one last call to Alexander, but he didn't answer. For 15 years, she had used her power to silence voices she deemed inappropriate. Now finally, it was her own voice that was being silenced by the weight of her own actions. As night fell over New York, a new reality was established. The woman who had survived 15 years of forced invisibility had not only regained her voice, she had used that voice to rewrite the rules of power for an entire city. 6 months later, Kesha stood on stage at Lincoln Center, not as a cleaning lady, but as the artistic director of New York's first inclusive ballet school. Funding had come from public donations that poured in after her story went viral and from an unexpected source, Alexander Silverton. Maya, now 9, danced in the front row of her class, surrounded by children of all colors and social classes. "Mom," she whispered before the performance, "you turned your pain into something beautiful." Margaret Silverton, on the other hand, now lived in a small apartment in Queens. Her old friends shunned her. The foundation had been dissolved, and she spent her days watching the growing success of the woman she had tried to destroy twice on television. Alexander had taken complete control of the family business, redirecting the Silverton fortune to social and arts programs. His first donation of $10 million went to Kesha's school. "Why are you doing this?" Margaret asked during one of the rare visits he still made. Because I've learned that our legacy should not be about who we exclude, but about who we include, he replied. David Kumar published a book about the case entitled The Dance of Justice, which became a national bestseller. Kesha used the royalties to expand her school to other cities. In an interview with CNN, Kesha was asked about forgiveness. I forgave Margaret, not for her, but for me. Holding on to anger would be like drinking poison and waiting for her to die. But that doesn't mean the consequences of her actions should disappear. Today, Kesha's school trains more than 500 children. Maya, who inherited her mother's natural talent, already plans to follow in her footsteps. But with one crucial difference, she grew up knowing that her voice matters. Margaret made one last attempt at redemption by showing up at the school during a performance. Maya saw her in the audience and with the wisdom of a child who grew up hearing about justice, whispered to her mother, I think she finally understands. Understand what, sweetheart? That talent has no color and that trying to dim someone else's light only leaves you in the dark. Kesha smiled, hugging her daughter. 15 years ago, a young ballerina had been destroyed by prejudice and power. But from that destruction, something more powerful was born. A woman who turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into inspiration. True revenge wasn't destroying Margaret Silverton. It was building a future where other children like Maya would never have to go through what Kesha did. It was proving that when someone tries to tear you down, the best response isn't to stoop to their level, but to rise so high that they become irrelevant. If this story touched your heart and inspired you to never give up on your dreams, even when the world seems to be against you, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices. Because sometimes justice is slow, but when it comes, it rewrites history in a way that no one will ever forget.